Welcome, everyone. My name is Jessica Tate, and my pronouns are she and her. I am from Nuyant, or Gidlach and what is currently known as British Columbia. I am very gratefully living, working, and playing as a guest in the treaty lands and territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit people. And we've already started in the chat, which is wonderful, but please feel free to share where you're from. We'd be very happy to learn a little bit more about you as well. Again, this meeting is being recorded, but we're gonna, if we can go to the next slide, please. Oh, yes, that was my introduction. I can also introduce you to Ian Skolton, who is the other part of the Sustainable Transportation team at ICE. Ian is program director, and I don't know if I shared my title, but I'm the Sustainable Transportation lead. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just want to go through go through the agenda so we all know what to expect. We're going to do a little bit of housekeeping and then an introduction to the Alberta Strategic Partnership Initiative and the Icebreaker series, as well as a very quick introduction to Indigenous clean energy. I'll be going in depth into the Charge Up program, provide a little bit of extra resources for folks, and then we'll have a Q&A. Next slide, please. Thank you so much. So saying it 3 times, but just I want everybody to be aware that this meeting is being recorded. The recording will also be shared on ICE's YouTube channel following, so that will be available. So please do keep in mind, we want to have the best sound quality that we have. And so if you could keep your microphones off until we get to the Q&A portion. However, anytime throughout the session, you may add your questions to the chat and we'll come back to them. And if any of you are shy, please don't hesitate to reach out with your questions following the session. Thank you. So the Icebreaker series is very, very exciting, and ICE is working with the Alberta Strategic Partnership Initiative, which actually these sessions are being supported by the Alberta Strategic Partnership Initiative. And I would like to invite Rob St. Dennis, I believe it's pronounced, to join and let us know a little bit more about the initiative and introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. Up here in Calgary, Treaty 7 territory, and it's Halloween. Happy Halloween. Joining you, I guess, as Loki today. And so I work with Prairie's Economic Development Canada and manage, or I guess work with the Alberta Indigenous Clean Energy Initiative. So if there's any nations in Alberta that are interested in developing their clean energy projects, we're a good resource to connect with. We have funding for a lot of the planning, development, and startup of clean energy projects. So I believe we have a web page that you can access. We'll drop it in the chat, and if you want to follow up after the session, we'd be happy to connect with any communities in Alberta. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Rob, and thank you for sharing your Halloween spirit. I want to share a little bit more about the Icebreaker series, if you're not already aware. We have actually already had 2 sessions, one for the Bringing It Home Project Accelerator and one for the 2020 Catalyst program. These are wonderful programs, and you can access them now on ICE's YouTube channel. Of course, Charge Up is being featured today, and I'd like to invite you all to the upcoming sessions for the Regional Energy Advisor Training Program, and then we have 2 youth programs, Generation Power and Imagination, both coming up soon. Dates are there, and I believe that the registration links may be shared in the chat. Next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so I want to just very, very briefly share a little bit about Indigenous Clean Energy. It is an independent, Indigenous governed nonprofit organization. And I know that the programs from what I hear from a lot of the participants, are life changing. We really work to ingrain culture, build capacity, and collaborate. So it's definitely a space looking to and an organization looking to advance Indigenous and broader sustainable prosperity by supporting First Nation, Inuit, and Métis um, clean energy participation from coast to coast to coast. Next slide. Thank you. Um, Even though some of our Icebreaker series, I think some of the programs are not featured in the Icebreaker series, we have a lot going on at ICE, and I'd really encourage you all to check out our website, start connecting with people, learn a little bit more about what is available, and introduce yourselves to the amazing ICE network and community of amazing people that are doing a lot of great work. Next slide. Yes, but I'm here today to share about ChargeUp. One of the first things I want to acknowledge is that ICE is a delivery organization for Natural Resources Canada's um, zero emission vehicle infrastructure program. So this is a bigger, broader program, and through ChargeUp, many of the criteria are still the same, but our program does focus specifically on serving Indigenous groups, and it makes it more accessible in terms of some of the key criteria in terms of the size and scope of projects. We have $1.6 million of project funding available for redistribution. And specifically, the program funds the purchase and installation of electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Next slide, please. Thank you. And why is this important? One of the first things that I'd like to, bring your attention to, if you're not already aware, is that we have a lot of EV infrastructure being built up um, in and around or around Canada, but a lot of it does it is centered around urban centers. So you can see in the map on the left, and these are kind of this may be individual or clusters of EV infrastructure, but a lot of it is focused on the southern part of the country and around urban centers. However, and this does the map on the right maybe doesn't cover also Métis and Inuit um, communities and settlements, but it kind of goes to show like there's quite a discrepancy. There's a lot of communities that are not being served right now, and we want to make sure that there's a lot of Indigenous participation and that Indigenous people have access uh, to this infrastructure as we see the sustainable transportation, like our whole way, all of our mobility is changing towards sustainable transportation. Next slide, please. Thank you. And, a lot of the subject matter is quite technical. People think about it in a lot of different ways, but I always want to kind of bring it back to, what does mobility serve? What do we rely on it for? And um, what types of things will be impacted if your ability to travel is has its own challenges, if you don't have the infrastructure needed to participate when with EVs, and as this transition is happening, as more and more manufacturers and whatnot are switching over to electric vehicles. So of course, you have employment and education, connection with family and friends, safety, food and supplies, and some of the things that we're talking about transportation, but these are the things that it serves. Next slide, please. So who is eligible to participate in the Charge Up program and access some of that funding? So this includes First Nation, Inuit, Métis communities and businesses. And this can be rural, remote, or urban. Um, but one of the really nice things about this program is that it also serves businesses. So some of the different programs that we see, maybe it's different provincial programs, for example, um, for indigenous groups, you may be able to have an additional amount, contribution amount to cover projects. For example, a regular uh, another business, a non-indigenous business, may be eligible for up to 50%, but maybe not 75% as communities would be. Through this program, communities and businesses are eligible for that kind of higher percentage of program funding. So I really think that's a great piece for the program. Next slide, please. And in terms of eligible locations, we have 5 different categories. So public, on-street, multi-unit residential buildings. One thing I will say about this is that multi-unit residential buildings doesn't include townhouses. So really looking at homes where maybe there are shared parking areas, such as low high rises, areas where some of the putting the infrastructure in could be a bit more of a challenge. Those kind of sites are available as well, and there's a very nice um, kind of very technical description in the program guide, but I won't get into that. Workplaces are another one. Light duty fleets is another category, actually. And some people have asked me, does it have to be kind of in community, even if it's a business? And no, it doesn't. It could be anywhere. Um, well, within Canada, it can be anywhere as long as it kind of meets one of these different groups. Next slide, please. Stacking. So charge up actually can be stacked with other programs. And so through the program, as I meant, or maybe I haven't mentioned it yet, forgive me, we cover up to 75% of project costs. And the program does allow for stacking up to 100%. One of the first questions I'd encourage people to ask if they're looking at a different funding stream um, that isn't private is to kind of find out if there's any of that broader DAVIP funding in it, because you can't have, our program, as I mentioned, is kind of coming from that broader program, the Zero Emissions Vehicle Infrastructure Program. If there's another funding program, please make sure that there's no ZEVIT funding kind of embedded in part of that other funding stream. Next slide, please. Eligible costs. So I'm not going to read these all out, but I would say that the program is quite comprehensive. One of the main things to kind of keep in mind is that the program does not cover ongoing maintenance or operational costs. It really is for the purchase and installation. So there may be all kinds of different things that you need to do to be able to have a site be ready to support a charging station. And so kind of a lot of those things well, the majority of those things are included. Another thing that is not included is just general overhead administrative fees. So you can actually include things like salary in your eligible project costs, as long as it's time directly devoted to the project. Yes, next slide, please. Choosing equipment. And so even though this is a little outside the scope of the funding, it is something that comes up so much that I wanted to share a little bit more about it, as I myself am still learning. I know a lot of people, this is such new information. It's not exactly common knowledge at this point. So kind of consider when you are, actually, this is a quote. This is a great quote from Electric Autonomy. So when purchasing charging hardware, keep in mind that each vehicle has its own limit on the rate of AC and DC charge that it can accept. Many EVs have a maximum DC charge capability of 115 kilowatts. So people may not be aware when they hear about the different charging equipment. They might think, oh, I just want the really powerful one. Your vehicle may have its own limitations to how much power it can receive at one time. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind, that these are smart systems. It's not like exactly like just filling your tank and can you just fill it faster. Um, the vehicles themselves will communicate with the charging infrastructure and give its own, they will give their own limitations. So something to kind of keep in mind as you're asking your questions when you're choosing equipment. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this slide, it's just a bit of a breakdown to kind of give you an idea of kind of use cases, great use cases and considerations of the different type of charging equipment. Um, so, for example, how frequently do you ideally want to be using the different type of equipment? Best time to use them, and some of the benefits and drawbacks. And even when I say drawbacks, it's more just an awareness. So people have to kind of consider, as you're kind of looking at these projects and you're asking your questions to all the different people, different proponents that you're working with, whether it be suppliers or you're kind of talking to utilities. Um, you know, you want to be informed about the commitments that you're making. So, um, yeah, so this is will be available to you, especially in the recording, but different types of locations that could be ideal for the level 2 chargers. You can consider workplaces, schools, retail locations, and and places that you're going to be staying for a little bit longer. So places that you're going to be staying for a little bit longer, but also in considering places that people visit frequently, as we kind of start to shift from maybe fueling up like a full tank, what people think of, to more top ups. So kind of everywhere you go, maybe you're going to be topping up a bit here and there. Um, and then for the level 3 chargers, a real main consideration is this location a spot where people are going to be stopping for a brief amount of time, or whether you're dealing with a fleet, what's your turnaround time for how long the vehicles are sitting. So, and also distance, is this along a corridor where people are traveling long distances and not really stopping for a long time in between. So that's just kind of a bit of a high level overview of some different things you can take in. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in continuing on with kind of choosing sites and equipment, I just wanted to offer some different considerations for you. So who are you serving and what are their needs? And then we have a couple of different examples. So accessibility, across everybody needs to consider accessibility, but especially when you're considering a community, you want to take really good care of your elders. You want to kind of consider, is the site that you're choosing really accessible? You want to kind of be thinking about what amenities and activities are nearby if people are stopping. And this can be a great thing to be thinking about for economic opportunity as well. Um, and some kind of more technical considerations being network connectivity strength. So the charging equipment does need to be able to be network connected. Um, and I know that in some areas, the broadband is not maybe not there, or the network connectivity is iffy. If you need to use your equipment and if you're considering charging um, or receiving payment for the use of the charging stations, the network connectivity is an important consideration. And same thing when it kind of goes to thinking about grid constraints and reliability. So, do you have, is it a strong, is this a location where the power goes out a lot? You might want to be kind of considering some other um, types of ways of ensuring that that equipment is able to kind of keep working when you need it to work. Just a quick note on connector types. I'm not going to read all of this, but I do get a lot of questions about what types of connectors, whether you can use, certain proprietary charging connector types, and I would say yes, but you do need to have some of the kind of universal charging, so that you're not making it so that uh, EV users that are kind of coming to visit your location can't actually charge. So I'll just share that. Next slide. And funding limits. So again, I'm not going to read all of this, but to kind of give you an idea, one thing I would like to point out is that you could probably consider this chart here as level two being its own thing, and then the level threes. In that the level two chargers, that reimbursement amount of up to 7,500 is per connector. So kind of the handle that you would plug in to your vehicle, that reimbursement amount is per connector. Whereas all of the level three chargers, it's per actual unit. So the unit itself might have two connectors, but it's still going to be to the max of each kind of power level there. Next slide, please. Yes, and so when you're kind of considering your charge up application and planning, um, because ICE is a delivery organization, we do have a limit of just under $100,000 per project, and so that is kind of a limitation that we do have. But that being said, each recipient has the ability to apply for multiple projects as long as those projects are distinct. So if you are kind of considering having, maybe you're looking to support um, a business like a gas station and you want to put in a fast charger, that would be its own project and would be up to a limit of 99. I'm not going to say it, but just under 100,000. If you're looking to have some level twos at your band office, but it's still, still for the same applicants and community, the level twos at the band office would be considered a separate project, and so you'd be starting again with a new kind of pot of money. So I think that that makes it really accessible when groups are really looking to build up the infrastructure in their area. Um, oh, sorry, can we go back just for one moment? Yes. So I also want to let you know that you can put multiple projects into group together, but I would encourage you not to. It takes about maybe half an hour, if that, to go through your application to submit an application. But if you have different sites that are distinct, uh, there's a benefit. Excuse me, I'm just gonna have a pardon me. There's a benefit to having those be distinct applications as well, because you're not able to request or put your reimbursement documentation in until you've completely finished the installation of the project. So if you had two different sites and they could fit together in your application because it's under that funding maximum, um, the reason I'd encourage you to have them be distinct is because if one finishes but the other one has a delay for whatever reason, you can't submit and get that reimbursement process going until both would be finished. So that's a benefit. And considering that these projects can be very expensive, um, and funding may not be reimbursed until about 9 months after completion, you kind of want that money back as soon as possible. So that's why I would encourage you to take that into consideration. Also, the timelines of some of these different projects could be different. So level twos can be installed much quicker than the level three projects. Next slide, please. Thank you. Another thing to kind of be aware of is that we don't determine who you're going to be working with or where you're going to be putting your sites. So you choose your partners, you choose your equipment, and your site locations. As I mentioned earlier, the chargers must be network connected or able to be network connected. Um, and to kind of give you a quick idea of the timelines, a level three definitely could take around a year to install, and you'll definitely be working with your utilities to on those types of projects. And then um, oh, sorry, and then another kind of important date as you're kind of making your plans is that currently the charger projects must be completed by October 1st, 2024. So that's just under a year at this point as we're coming to the end of October. So if you are thinking of doing those kind of level 3 fast charging projects, definitely want to get that ball rolling right away. Start talking to your utility, finding your partners, getting your kind of community engagement if need be going. Next slide. Thank you. Oh, yes. So this is just a reminder for me to share this. So this is our just a quick screenshot of our charge up program page. And the application is a form on the that you can just, as you can see, just click apply now. But I do want you to be aware that if you, when you download the applicant guide, you can actually pre-see all of the questions and all of the different information we're looking for within within the application, so you can kind of prepare it in advance and start getting quotes together, site photos, all the things that we're looking for, so that once you kind of go into the application, you're prepared. Um, yes, and you can also access me there too because you can click on the message the transport manager. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so just a different way of sharing some of that information. I'm very happy to meet with you. If you have questions, we can do an intro meeting, discuss your project ideas. Oh, and one thing I did forget to mention is that if you do have any issues with kind of uploading documents to the application, you can reach out to me. You can share them via email. Everything will be put together and as like supporting documentation if you move forward with your agreement. So you're welcome to share that with me if you're having any technical difficulties, and I'd be happy to kind of add that to your file. Yes, and I have I think two more slides here, and then hopefully we can get into some good conversation. Next slide, please. Thank you. Definitely want to invite you all to the ICE network. This is a great platform for you to be meeting others doing a similar type of work than you are or as you are. It's a place where you can learn about funding opportunities. There are additional resources on there, different events that are going on. So yeah, it's open and free. Um, and yeah, we'd really like you all to kind of get active and join us and add and share what you're working on and yeah, start collaborating more. Next slide, please. Yes. Okay, so this is actually not related to what we're talking about today exactly, but I do want to share it anyways. So, electric autonomy has an EV fleets course that I find I'm recommending to almost everybody that I'm meeting with because people are coming in with a different, knowledge base around electric vehicles. Some people have been tasked with, getting these projects going, but they haven't done a test drive ever. They don't know very much about EVs. They don't know much about EV infrastructure. And I just found this is a really great resource, is the EV fleets course. And even though it's a lot focused on fleets, it kind of starts from the very basics and has all kinds of additional resources that kind of you can connect to through it. It also talks about funding. It also talks about charging infrastructure, project planning. So and it's free and you can be self-guided through it. You can kind of pick and choose your topics or you can do the whole thing, but definitely also if you're kind of considering that community engagement, if you're that person who is really trying to learn and feel confident in sharing when you're talking to people in your community or your employees or whoever else is kind of invested in whether you take on these projects or not. I would encourage you to check this out because it is such a great resource. And Also, because right now until March 11th, if you do go through the program and share a little bit about it, you can have free access to their expo. And one of the things that I would love to see is more kind of more people coming out and learning in these spaces where they have access to people already doing the work, ask their questions, and really, really add your voices. So I'll just share that there as well. Okay, and I think that's it, and I think we're able to open the floor up now for some questions and answers. Do we have any in the chat already?
We do have a few questions in the chat. Do you want me to read them or do you want me to put them on the chat again, Jessica?
If you don't mind reading them out, that would be probably easier for me because I imagine there's a lot of other, we have people introducing themselves and where they're from. Um, if
Okay,
you
we
have,
have one from Kiran. For communities and businesses needing help installing and purchasing the chargers, where can they look to find that help?
so sorry, for communities looking for help to find where to purchase and then
Yeah.
so there are all kinds of different suppliers. Um, I think we do have probably some on the line today, but I would encourage you to check out several different suppliers. Again, the that electric autonomy course probably has some different examples. I know that we have some indigenous owned suppliers that are doing great work, and then we have some other, you know, great suppliers that have a lot of experience working with indigenous communities and businesses. Um, I guess what I could say is if you'd like to email me afterwards with that inquiry, I can share a variety of different suppliers that you could um, look into to learn more about. That would be helpful.
Someone else asked, are 50-50% partnerships with a private company an option?
I believe they are. Yeah. Which is, I mean, also I think a very important part of this because if you're carrying the whole cost of this, that can be a barrier in itself to accessing the program. So sometimes if you have, you can share that load. That can be good. And also a lot of groups, a lot of indigenous groups have businesses that are partnerships already. So we wouldn't want them to be excluded from the opportunity.
There was another question, can the chargers be purposed for revenue generation in locations that are non on Indigenous land?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They can be anywhere. And yeah, great opportunities.
I think those are the questions that I had, but if someone else has any other questions, just put them on the chat, please.
Or raise your hand. You can raise your hand if you have a question, or maybe even just unmute yourself. Nicholas?
Yes, hi. It's a bit off topic, but I wanted to ask people who have probably encountered or solved this problem. Maybe a lot of members of our remote communities are worried about the impact of the mining industry on EVs, or vice versa. How do you have? And I mean, I know the figures. I know that burning fossil fuel has a whole different impact on the land as well. So how have you overcome these false information problems in your path to EV adoption? Maybe a question for I don't know if this is the right place, but I'm just curious.
Well, yeah. So it is a little bit outside of the scope of the funding program for me, but I would say that you're absolutely right. It is a concern. It's a very valid concern, not just about the mining industry itself, but also about kind of equitable participation. It's a very big and very important subject. What I would say is that for myself, I had the ability, as with having my platform, to kind of bring it up and again, like maybe I'm not being asked to talk about it, but to kind of bring it up and ensure that it's part of the conversation. I also am encouraging groups that I'm meeting with to kind of, you know, be learning more and be participating more, making sure um, that they're learning so that they can be part of these conversations and participating in different types of events. I'm also, because I have the opportunity to work with different sector proponents, helping to support um, a little bit of education for them about engaging with different Indigenous peoples and communities. So I think we all, this is a very this transition is happening with a lot of different players, and so we all have a part to play in this. And there are some that have, much more, much more invested parts if they're in an area where that mining is happening. But I think we all need to take responsibility in having this be part of the conversation and bringing attention to it and learning about it. Hope that answers your question. And if anybody else that's joining has an answer too, if it's something that you're addressing, or you're welcome to share your thoughts as well.
We had another question on the chat. Have you received applications from remote communities on diesel-fired power plants?
That's a good question. I know that so we have some rural, can also be like some rural locations um, can be kind of very similar to remote. But I do know that we have some that are remote. We have, and in some of those places too, some of the limiting factors may also be, you know, accessing electricians. And again, like there are a lot of different partners that you'll be working with and different types of limitations when you're talking about more remote communities. I do know we have an example, not from this program, but we do have kind of one of our uh, past catalysts who led a project in Gull Bay First Nation, and they actually did a combination um, with solar as well as like battery storage and EV charging. And but I also do know that that there's an opportunity if you are in a diesel dependent community, that there may be an opportunity for kind of using some of the electricity that would be wasted. Um, if it's overnight and you're kind of, I don't know all the technical aspects around it, but I do know that there could be kind of waste energy that happens by keeping the um, generators going at off times, and so that might be an opportunity for you to have probably level 2 chargers that are using that energy that would be otherwise wasted. And if you are in a remote community, very likely um, you're driving really around your community. And so that's an opportunity also to use your one pedal driving and regenerative braking to recharge your batteries as well. So there certainly are opportunities there. You have any other questions? If we have anybody on the line that has experience too, that would like to share, then please unmute and share your experience if you'd like to.
This is Eduardo. I'm calling from Corning. One of the biggest things that I have found is that the actual level 2 chargers are extremely expensive. Can you hear me well, okay?
I heard level 2 chargers are expensive.
Level 3.
Level 3
there's
chargers?
Yes, because you mentioned they have a list of suppliers, but the ones that I have found are like the only one that I have is Flow, which is the brand that everybody seems to use, and they're super expensive. Like they price at the level 3 at $81,000, and that brings the price of the project to a very high level because there still need to be some kind of profit based on that. So I've been trying to source from literally from China, and I have found suppliers that are CSA approved and they are certified that can come to Canada. Is that something that is an option for looking for suppliers different than the ones that are already in Canada? No, because we can have like a group purchase that will make the chargers less expensive. They come in a bundle, like So that's what I wanted to know, if there is a way to communicate with the communities and to actually source as a group the chargers, which is obviously the most expensive part of.
Yeah, that's a great question. And forgive me because some of the technical aspects of the I don't have memorized, but I know in the program guide it does kind of give some very specific details around which charger types are um, eligible for reimbursement. Um, and whether it's coming from here or if it's coming from another place, as long as it meets that criteria, then that's fine. Also, to your point of kind of connecting and maybe having group purchasing, I think that's a really great thing to kind of offer is whether you can kind of work with some of these groups, and if you have neighboring communities, for example, or several businesses, and you kind of want to kind of coordinate to get a better price, that is definitely something that I'm sure you can explore and is not an issue with the program. Um, as long as what you have on your invoices are is separate just for reimbursement purposes. And to your point about these being expensive projects, they definitely are expensive, or they can be expensive, but that's part of the reason why we have these funding programs is to help offset quite a bit of that cost. Um, and again, level 3 chargers are really great, but I would encourage you to be really making sure you're asking the questions about whether level 3s are necessary for the use case. Because I know from my experience, a lot of people have just heard from somebody, oh, you want level 3s because you want it to be fast. Well, I have an example of a community that I was in contact with that had about 400 people in their community, and they were about to apply for 4 level 3 fast chargers, even though the majority of their community members maybe only traveled 150 kilometers once a week. So in that case, that expense and investment may not be actually serving the community. Really looking at whether it's really necessary, I think they're going to end up going for a lot more level 2 chargers and possibly one level 3 charger. Um, so that is another consideration when you're kind of thinking about the cost of these projects, is whether that higher cost option is actually serving what you're looking at. Yes, now I see lots of hands. Yay. I'm not sure who was first, forgive me. Is it Stephen or Stefan?
Well, Stephen, yeah,
Stephen.
both of them. Okay, I just want to say this is a good insight you've provided, and I know a lot of organizations will be interested. I just want to put the information out there that, I mean, concerning, what's his name's, Edrado, I think he was the one that asked the question. Yeah, there are other EV manufacturers in country. He mentioned Flow. I think there's another one, Hypercharge. There's another one, ChargePoint. Our organization, we have agreement to sell these chargers in country. And they even have the level 3 fast chargers as available, that you don't need to go all the way to China. And they have high capacity, even up to 600 kilowatt chargers currently in Canada. Like you're providing funding for them, there are also organizations we could talk to, we'll work with to provide funding. And there's equally an organization currently in Canada that wants to deploy EV chargers across Canada free of charge, so long you can provide facilities. And depending on the cost, then we could apply to use this funding to compensate and to complete the project for you. So I think I dropped my contact in the chats. Anyone interested can reach out and we can discuss these details further.
Thank you for sharing that. Jordan? Jordan, did you have something you wanted to share? If so, you're still on mute.
Yeah, no, I did. Sorry, I just couldn't find where my Zoom was on my screen.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah, I just had a question around like partnerships. So the application process sounds pretty straightforward. Are we needing like BCRs, like band council resolutions, or municipal resolutions, or letters of support from the community, or just the organizations? Like, how does that work?
Well, yeah. Because it's available to communities and businesses. Obviously, for what you're sharing, if it's a business, you wouldn't have those types of things. It's definitely recommended. But what oftentimes when it's a community, what we'd be really looking for is, yes, do you have community support? Can you share that with us? But also, if they're going to be paying for the remaining portion, do you have an authorized person, representative that can sign off on the remaining contribution amount? So if we're covering up to 75% and you're making the commitment for the other 25%, we'd be looking for that kind of acknowledgement from the applicant, and if it's the community, then somebody in the community that is authorized. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, less strict than some of the other programs. Chantal?
So mine was sort of in relation to the previous question, but you had mentioned in the application planning that there is multiple projects can be grouped into a single application. So I work for AMC, and I'm wondering, and you said there may be benefits to having separate applications. So like if we were to acquire funding for maybe 3 communities, for example, First Nations. How is that different compared to just the First Nation applying on their own?
Yeah. So in terms of the application, when I say that, and like having separate agreements for projects. What I would say is, for example, if you have 3 communities that are looking to do all projects at the same time, that cost might significantly exceed our maximum of just under $100,000. So you wouldn't be getting the maximum amount that you would be eligible for if you were to just separate them in projects as separate distinct projects in your application. So there's that factor. Again, there's the consideration of when you're looking to get your reimbursement. If you have any delays on any of those different distinct projects, then the other ones go forward, then you can start that reimbursement amount. But if you have it as kind of a collaboration, that's fine. For example, we have one community who are putting in 12 level 2 chargers, and they initially did apply for a single application, and we separated it out. So some of that supporting documentation, so the letter from the community saying that the additional contribution amount, all we did was kind of clarify that within the letter. You may have the same representative that is applying. Those types of things are fine. This is really to look at protecting, our applicants and ensuring that they get the most that they can get out of it, and also that they are able to get their reimbursements quickly. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Jordan, your hand is still up. I'm not sure if it just hasn't come down or if you have another question.
Nope, that's old. Sorry, I'll take.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, it's me again, Eduardo. The question I have is, what about the combination of EV charging and producing the energy with either renewable energy or other sources? Like, I'm going to say renewable energy, wind or solar panels to provide the energy for the charger. Is that something that is being contemplated as some kind of obviously not part of the funding that comes from the e-charge, but also from funding to renewable energy sources?
Yeah,
Because one thing that I think is, if the energy using the EV is coming from diesel or is coming from fossil fuel production, propane or whatever other source, then there is a problem, because then you are doing something with something that is dirty, so it's going to get dirty again.
yeah. So
Okay.
definitely, sorry, I'm sorry. Let me know when you're finished. Finished.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm finished.
Okay, thank you. Apologies. I don't want to interrupt you. Sometimes we pause after when we're thinking. Okay, so definitely a great point. And it's something that lots of groups are looking at. I would have to double check about what exactly might be considered as part of funding, but I do know that for sure you could group the funding for the EV charging and installation, like the equipment and the installation of that equipment in this program. It may be that you need to have funding separate for, like, the program doesn't cover solar panels and this type of thing, but it might be able to kind of be connected with joint funding from another source. Um, and it's definitely something that a lot of groups are curious about. And definitely to your point, big part of this transition that we're having really does have to do with reducing carbon emissions, and, and and whatnot. So definitely, if you're um, charging and some of that energy is coming from diesel, that's problematic. But again, um, it could still be utilizing wasted energy. So energy at night, for example, that is not being used by a community that is diesel dependent, that is still the wasted energy to be able to benefit from charging electric vehicles that are not emitting, is still, I would say, a positive. Excuse me. I think I've made it through the majority of this without coughing a lot. Forgive me, I'm just getting over a cold. So yes. I know we're kind of coming to the end of our session. So if anybody does have additional questions, or if I didn't adequately answer your question and I could potentially kind of go back and do a little bit more, please don't hesitate to reach out with your inquiries, or connect on the ICE network, and maybe some others that are doing the work may be able to give you some insight as well. And I see, Eduardo, you have your hand up again. Head? Or not? Okay.
No, I'm done. I just wanted to make sure that my inquiry about dirty energy, the situation using, well, it's usually even more expensive to use diesel to generate electricity for the car than use the car with internal combustion engine. If the energy is defeating the purpose of an EV, by using electricity generated with fossil fuel. Okay, so that's my comment on that.
Forgive me, it was a little muffled for me, so I'm not sure that I quite caught what you were saying, but I
Okay,
hope everybody else
let me
did.
let me just repeat it again. I said when you're generating electricity for charge an EV with diesel is worse than using a diesel vehicle because of the combination of emissions is very low efficiency production compared to.
Yeah, I guess my point is that if you have a community that is already on diesel, and maybe they're even perhaps going through a transition, they're working on projects to change from diesel. That's one thing. So if you're already a diesel dependent community and you already have that, electricity that's being wasted, it's an area where you could at least put that energy, electricity to use. And so not advocating for people setting up diesel generators just to charge EV vehicles. So I appreciate the distinction there. So we'll wrap up. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I thank you all for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day.